Good morning, guys, and welcome to my unboxing and review of the high-grade Gustav Karl Unicorn version. This is a 2019 release, and this is a model of the Gustav Karl Type 13, which showed up in Gundam Unicorn, and it is a predecessor to the Gustav Karl seen in Hathaway's Flash. I got this kit for $29, which is on the upper end of kind of typical high-grade prices, especially for a grunt suit. That's in line with kits like the Mighty Strike Freedom and like the Dual Blitz Gundam, but that's for good reason. In Universe, this kit is 22 meters tall, which is quite large for a mobile suit. I think it's approaching Nu Gundam height. I think that's around 23.5 meters. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of plastic in this box compared to a typical high grade, especially with this design, with how chunky it is, with all the extra armor on it. So this is a standard release, number 221 in the high grade line. On the front, you have some pretty typical box art. Unfortunately, my one big thing I know I'm not going to like about this kit going into it is that its primary weapon is the Jegan beam rifle, which I think is extremely dinky, and I don't really like how it looks with this kit. I'll try it out with a few other kind of extra weapons I have lying around from other high-grade kits, but the default weapon that comes in this, it is in universe lore accurate because this was developed from the Jegan and uses kind of a normalized set of equipment with the Jegan, but it's still a little I guess underwhelming compared to how imposing the actual kit is. So in the bottom here we have the painted build of the Gustav Karl, showing off the gimmicks of the kit with the shoulder shield showing off the Jegan rifle, the beam sabers, the wrist-mounted grenade launchers, some of the kind of articulation gimmicks. And then on the other side we have some information about the Gustav Karl's development. You can pause and read that if you want, but pretty much it's developed from the Jegan, and outside of the Nu Gundam, this did kickstart the development of this mobile suit. Kickstarted a lot of the kind of I guess obsession with increasing the size and thruster output of mobile suits that happened in kind of mid-UC, late mid-UC, prior to the miniaturization of the Minovsky reactor in late UC with things like the F90. So inside the box we get 4 bags of runners, as well as this very kind of standard HGUC style manual, nice painted, full spread painted build here, showing off the Gustav Karl. The mobile suit itself is a design that I think is really cool. I like how kind of unique and bulky it is without going into complete goofball territory. I bring it up a lot, but the Alex Chobham armor is completely goofy. Something like the Virtue has very kind of funny proportions. This is almost there, but I think it doesn't quite cross that event horizon from going from imposing to very funny looking. But yeah, as you can see here, the head height is going to be 22 meters, which is significantly taller than the standard 18-meter height of a Gundam, or the 17.5-meter height of a Zaku. And inside it looks like it's going to be a pretty typical build, some parts in color on the back, and then on the inside, just a pretty typical high-grade construction. But the parts themselves are going to be quite large given the overall kind of heft and height of this mobile suit. So, as for the runners themselves, we get 10 runners inside the box alongside this foil sheet of color correcting stickers. A lot of these are things you're going to expect, but these 3 being camera stickers, presumably 1 and 2 are going to be for head cameras, 3 is going to be for the Jegan beam rifle, and then the rest are color correcting stickers, a bunch of black stripe details, and 4 being this kind of interesting navy blue detail. I think, if I remember right, this is going to be for that weird single antenna it has on the head that looks like a broken V-fin. But yeah, a pretty typical high-grade sticker sheet, not much to comment on. It's a little annoying that those black stripe details are not on the kit, but they're probably simple enough to paint in. And as for the runners themselves, these runners are printed in July of 2024, and being a 2019 high grade, this will be using polycaps, using PC-132, or a small sheet of 1/144th scale polycaps. So runner A here, a multicolor runner for the Karl Gustav. As you can see, some of these parts are quite large, and these are where a lot of the stripes are going to go. These very thick kind of leg armor parts. You see a recessed detail here for the stripes. But yeah, this is a multicolor runner coming in 4 colors. It is going to be in white for some auxiliary parts for the skirts, the collar, and some kind of vent or thruster details. This kind of main gray for the armor. You see parts for the leg armor here and other armor parts. And red for some kind of auxiliary parts, including the head and a cap piece here. And then you will have a part in clear pink to replicate the visor. I'm probably going to paint behind the visor with like plated silver or something just to help the details inside pop. Runners B1 and B2, B2 being a copy of the left half of B1. Going to be a number of different armor parts in that kind of main gray color of the kit, including parts for the head and the kind of weird single antenna thing that looks like a broken V-fin. Odd design choice, but we'll see how it looks on the kit. Runners C1 and C2 for a number of armor parts in navy blue, C2 being a copy of the small part of runner C1 for duplicate parts for the feet. We also have parts for the back skirt here, the torso, and I believe this is the shoulder shield. Runner D in a dark kind of primer gray for many of our frame parts. You see many of the frame and joint parts that are going to be used in this kit here, as well as parts for the Jegan beam rifle and parts for the hands. It looks like we're going to get 2 holding hands and a trigger finger hand for the right side only. Unfortunate. And 2 of runner E in a very dark, almost black color for many more of our joint parts. You also have accent parts for things like the thrusters, joint caps, and some kind of auxiliary armor parts. Finally, the venerable runner SB13 for a set of standard 1/144th scale beam saber effect parts in clear pink. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be a pretty kind of typical high-grade build, of course, apart from the scale of the parts. So I will see you after the build. All right, welcome back. Here's the high-grade Gustav Karl snap built panel line, although there aren't too many opportunities to panel line on this kit. And lightly painted. I ended up not using most of the color correcting stickers on the sheet, just the small red one for the front of the crotch. All of the other ones I just replaced with paint with some Gundam markers. It was very quick and easy to do, but we'll go over that in a second. For the build for this kit, despite its very large stature, as you'll see in the size comparison, it is, as you would expect, a very kind of typical high-grade construction, especially kind of a semi-modern one, like Witch for Mercury. So there's going to be some poly caps used in this kit. Nothing too crazy. I think the joints are mostly still fairly strong. Things like the elbows and knees don't even use poly caps, so it's still like just a complete normal like PS plastic frame. Nub marks on this kit are fairly normal, especially for like a modern high grade. There are going to be some problematic ones, but for the most part, the nub marks are the gates are either placed in places that are going to be hidden and obscured once the entire thing is assembled, or they are on edges, or they're thin, or some combination of the 3. Of course, there are going to be some annoying ones, like on the seams of the forearms. There's going to be a very prominent nub mark, so just be careful while you clean things up, and just especially on the kind of dark blue parts. Those I found did not clean up super easily. A lot of the very kind of dark gray frame color parts did clean up extremely easily. The gray is kind of in between. The primary gray of the armor was kind of in between the two in terms of ease of cleanup. But outside of that, there isn't really much to comment on about the build. It's what you would expect if you've built any modern high grades. Now, getting to aesthetics, the first thing to note about this kit is it is huge. The stature of this kit is quite impressive. You'll see in a bit. The head height is actually the same as the Nu Gundams. The extra height from the Nu Gundam, I believe, comes from the very tall antennas or whatever. The actual listed head height is 22 meters, the same as the Gustav Karl. So yeah, this kit is quite large, and it is considerably bulkier than something like the Nu Gundam. It takes up a lot more volume. It is way heftier, and I think that contributes to a very unique design that kind of distinguishes it from a lot of the kind of typical visor Fetty grunt suits, things like the Jegan or the various Jims or the Nemo or something over the years. Aesthetically, this kit is very interesting, and it's also pretty much entirely accurate outside of the color correcting stickers. The only part that wasn't color accurate that I noticed was on the kind of Jegan beam rifle it uses. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a tiny camera here above the barrel. That's just a gray piece because this is just 2 halves of sandwiched together in the barrel. That is just in kind of the primer frame gray as the rest of the rifle. So I just painted that in using a drop of metallic pink paint. Speaking of paint, the parts that I did paint in, the front head camera in metallic pink. Same thing for behind the visor. It's just a red piece behind the visor, so it looks fine if you don't paint it in. I just use metallic pink to help it shine a little more behind the visor. The rear head camera, this is just in the same kind of main tone of gray as the armor, so I painted that in metallic pink. And then on the sides of the legs, these black stripe details that are just gray, that, as you saw in the unboxing section, are just gray on the runner. I did paint them using metallic black. So even without doing the little bit of painting I did, if you were to just use the foil stickers, that they look fine. And aside from that, apart from again the Jegan beam rifle, the entire kit is completely color accurate except for on the thrusters. The inside kind of surface of each of the thrusters is supposed to be in white. or silver. It was kind of hard to tell from the kind of line art, but yeah, that's not color accurate, but again, they very rarely are in high grades outside of something like the Super Robot Wars line. So yeah, that's to be expected. It's a high grade. So it is pretty much as color accurate as you can expect from a high grade. It's quite nice. Of course, these kind of recessed details in the shoulders are just all like one solid white piece. So if you want them to be accurate, you will just have to shade it in black with like a black panel liner or something. Again, to be expected from a high grade. But yeah, the way the geometry of this kit, the way everything kind of layers on top of each other, super interesting. There are a lot of details that kind of jut out, especially with the shoulder shield, these large black parts on the backs of the shins, or on the calves. These details jutting out from the sides of the shins. As it spins around, you'll see there's a very kind of prominent thick power piping above the front skirt armor. The way that there's two red pieces, one for the cockpit door, one for the crotch, and the way this blue armor breaks it up gives the kind of illusion that's one seamless, very large red piece. That's very cool. The unique kind of broken V-fin antenna look on this kit. Oh yeah, that's one more thing to mention. The tip of the antenna is in the same kind of main shade of armor gray that the rest of the antenna is in. I just painted that in with a bit of seed dark blue. Yeah, between the geometry, the stature, and the kind of almost perfect color accuracy of the high-grade Gustav Karl, aesthetically this is an extremely great and unique kit that certainly contributes to the overall appeal and makes it a great addition for most collections if you don't already have this kit. So of course, going over the color correcting stickers that I did not use very quickly, sticker 1 is going to be for the front head camera right there. Sticker 2 is going to be for the rear head camera right there. Sticker 3, the only one that I did use, is for this metallic red stripe in the crotch armor. Sticker 4 is going to be a wraparound kind of navy blue sticker for the antenna on the head. And then stickers 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all going to be for the black stripe details on the legs. So getting into a quick size comparison, here's the high-grade Gustav Karl standing next to a standard size high-grade, being the high-grade Blue Destiny Unit 1, and a standard size master grade, being the master grade Jim Sniper 2 White Dingo team. As you can see, very much in like kind of Nu Gundam style, it is about midway between a standard high-grade and a standard master grade in size. It will come up just short of a standard master grade's shoulder, standing in kind of just a neutral basic pose. So yeah, this kit will take up a considerable amount of space on your shelf between both its height and its volume, with how kind of massive and thick this kit is. Like, these proportions are ridiculous. Again, they toe the line between kind of like imposing and comical. So yeah, just keep that in mind when considering the shelf space that you want to allocate to this kit. So for accessories, here's the high-grade Gustav Karl with everything it comes with. As you can see, this is a very basic spread. Most of the price for this kit is going to come in the sheer amount of plastic for the mobile suit itself, for how kind of large it is. But yeah, starting as usual with the hand options, you will of course only get 3 hands in this kit, 2 standard high-grade holding hands, 1 for each side, and then a trigger finger hand only for the right side that I have right now just permanently bonded to the Jegan beam rifle here. While I recommend stealing a larger weapon from a different high-grade kit, I will try it out with. I have 4 different kind of rifles in mind to use with the Gustav Karl. That'll show off later in the posing section. Just out of box, the only thing you have is this Jegan beam rifle, so if you don't have a spare weapon, just there's no reason not to have the hand just fused to the Jegan beam rifle at all times. Speaking of which, here's the Jegan beam rifle. We've seen it a million times before. Despite coming on a unique runner for the Gustav Karl, this is going to be identical to any other high-grade Jegan beam rifle that you've seen throughout the many Jegan variants throughout the years. This is of course an extremely simple build, as I mentioned earlier. It is literally 2 halves sandwiched together, 1 part for the barrel. The magazine is of course not removable, and other than that, not much to mention. It's kind of very minimal surface detail, so not much opportunity to panel line, and yeah, it's the Jegan beam rifle. You will of course get a second arm for the shoulder, or I guess the backpack mounted shield. That comes with this very short arm. When it's not in use, just kind of on the back here, and when you want to use it, we'll swap it out of course for this longer arm that can articulate around the shoulder and to like kind of position it to the side of the Gustav Karl. And then you will have 2 standard 1/144th scale beam saber effect parts. Not much to comment on here. These are the same beam effects that you would have seen on a million other HGUC kits. And the beam saber handles that you will use with those effects are stored in the side skirts. So just be careful, because the side skirt will come off very easily, but this bottom part will pivot outwards, revealing the beam saber here, and then that can be taken out fairly easily, but again, it's easier just to pop this off, take the beam saber out, and then put it back. And again, there's not much to comment on here. This is going to be the same shade of gray that comprises the main color of the Gustav Karl itself. And apart from that, it's just one piece, a pretty basic beam saber, all things considered, not much to comment on. So yeah, accessories are definitely a weak point of this kit, but again, that isn't really a problem with the kit itself so much as it is the design of the Gustav Karl, like in universe. Like it has a set of standardized equipment with the rest of the Fetty Grunt suits, like the Jegan. So yeah, it wasn't really supposed to come with much, so you can't really fault the kit for that. But it's not going to get much better with articulation, I'll tell you that much. Like, I don't think anyone seeing this design is expecting this thing to be a kind of articulating king, but we'll take a look here. Starting with the head, of course. You will actually get a quite far look up, all things considered. It will look down a decent amount. You will, of course, get some side-to-side tilt, and as you would expect, a full 360-degree rotation. Moving on to the arms then, for the shoulders, the entire kind of assembly inside the torso will slide out to allow for a full shoulder swing forward, which is quite nice. The shoulder cannot independently articulate of the arm. So for side arm raises, you will get a very impressive almost last shooting pose, which I honestly wasn't expecting. This is quite impressive. Yeah, like even though it looks ridiculous, like it's still very impressive that it can even hit this. I was honestly not really expecting that. You will, of course, get a full 360 rotation in the upper bicep, a double bend in the elbow, although you're not going to get a full 180 bend, of course, because of the very thick armor on the shoulder. Unique to the left arm of the Gustav Karl is this grenade launcher here, so the door will just open up, and there are two very nice color-separated grenades inside. Of course, they are kind of fused together and just go in the arm. You cannot pose it having fired one of them out or something. And then, of course, the wrist is going to be a ball joint instead of a polycap, which will do ball joint things. If you built any other HGUC kit that uses polycap wrists, you know exactly the kind of articulation you're going to get from them. The torso then, this is where the kit becomes quite weak in terms of articulation. As you might imagine from this design, you will get no ab crunch whatsoever forward. Backwards, you will get next to nothing before it pops off the ball joint. In terms of side to side, again, you will get extremely minimal articulation before it pops off the ball joint, and you cannot get a full 360 without it popping off the ball joint. The most you can get is a slight tilt to one side or the other. This thing is not going to 360. The arm for the backpack shield is on a kind of peg and socket thing, so it can rotate around, and then the shield itself is on a ball joint, so it can do ball joint things. The articulation is, of course, going to extend out beyond the shoulder with the extended arm, which you will see in the posing section. These thrusters cannot articulate. Moving on to the waist then. The front skirts can only rotate up a little less than 45 degrees. These two are separated off the runner, which is nice, and they are on separate ball joints. Unfortunately, this very large power piping here really obstructs the articulation of the skirts, which will limit the front kicks very heavily, as you will see. The side skirts can rotate up a little more than 45 degrees, and this gigantic back skirt can pivot upwards, but of course you cannot pivot upwards too much before you pop off the torso. Now for the legs then, in the hips you will have a kind of pivot mechanism. I don't know how you can see that in the joint there. So if you push one leg up, the other leg will swing down. I don't know how useful that will be in articulation, but that's something you can do. For front kicks then, if you just go like straight forward, the most you will get is about 45 degrees, which isn't great, but if you swing the leg to the side a little bit, you will get just about 90 degrees, which is, I'm honestly surprised it can hit that with how massive these legs are. For side raises, you will hit a little bit below 90 degrees, but as you can see, the polycap joint connecting the waist to the leg is a bit weak and it cannot hold that raise to the side. The ball joint connecting the waist to the torso is quite weak, and the torso does pop off at a moment's notice. So for rear kicks, the most you will get is just about 45 degrees, which is about to be expected with how like bulky the legs are. Yeah, again, this torso does not want to stay in. For the knees then, if you just like kind of leave the leg like this, you will get about a 90-degree bend, but there is a mechanism in the knee to extend the knee bend. The entire knee will slide. The entire leg will slide up from the shin, and then this kind of back armor piece will slide down, and then that will give you a little more than a 90-degree knee bend. So I don't know how necessary that was. I don't know who's going to pose their Gustav Karl doing kind of an extreme knee bend, but that is cool that you have that option. But the only thing to keep in mind is when you push the when you push the shin back up into the leg, it does tend to activate that kind of waist pivot joint, which is very annoying. Honestly, I would rather they just didn't include the waist pivot. I'm not super sure how that helps things. I guess if you wanted to kind of tilt one side down to get a better front kick, you could do that if you wanted to. You will, of course, get rotation in the upper thigh, although not a full 360, because, of course, this giant leg armor will collide with the waist. Okay, so for the auxiliary kind of thrusters on the leg, for these ones on the outside, you will get some tilt on them, but not too much. As I mentioned earlier, this back armor piece will slide up and down to facilitate that knee bend. And then in the feet, this ankle armor is going to be on a ball joint. It unfortunately does not extend super far, so you don't get that much articulation out of it. You can just kind of wiggle it around a little bit. The entire foot can swing forward, not far at all because of this gigantic kind of shin armor. It can swing downwards, again, not very far because of this large thruster in the back. And then your side to side will be surprisingly decent, although I don't know how much the Gustav Karl will actually benefit from that. Of course, there is no toe separation. This is just one giant piece. So yeah, articulation is surprisingly strong in the arms, but the kind of abysmal torso articulation and poor leg articulation is really going to limit the kind of poses you can have this in. So we will see if that is more than made up for by the presence of the Gustav Karl itself. So let's see it in action in some poses. So getting the high-grade Gustav Karl into a bit of a spin, doing the pose seen on the box art, this kind of wide-legged stance firing off the wrist-mounted grenades, holding the Jegan beam rifle just kind of tucked up by its side. This was the pose chosen for the box for good reason. It demonstrates the main strengths of this kit to demonstrate the kind of presence that it has. This kit looks its best in kind of wide-legged ground poses where it takes up the most space and it can emphasize its heft and bulk, which is a common through line you'll see with a lot of the heavily armored suits I've already taken a look at and will take a look at in the next like week or two. Yeah, so this pose demonstrates that it looks its best on the ground as well. You'll see like in a couple of poses that it does not look too great flying in the air. It's definitely at its best on the ground. This is also pretty much the only pose I think the Jegan beam rifle looks good on it because it's so kind of small in comparison to the heft of the Gustav Karl. Again, it's accurate to its appearance in Unicorn. It did have the Jegan beam rifle there. It just, like, from a pure model kit aesthetic perspective, it does not look great with the Gustav Karl. So yeah, this is a pretty good pose. I would definitely consider having this on the shelf. So moving on to show off one of the beam sabers that comes with the Gustav Karl, of course tucked up in the side skirts. This is just to demonstrate that it doesn't look too great with the beam sabers. Of course, you can always pose it with the beam sabers, and they do exactly what you would expect them to do. It's just an excuse to have the beam effect out and just have it kind of throwing its weight around in a melee pose. It'll probably look good if it's doing like a beam saber clash with like a messer or something, but just by itself with the beam saber out, this is the best kind of grounded swinging pose I could do. While the arm articulation is quite nice, especially in the shoulders, the leg articulation leaves a lot to be desired, and the inability for the torso to actually rotate in any meaningful way means it's kind of hard to express the motion behind a melee strike, which is why in the manual, when it's showing off the beam saber, it has it in like a flying, about to give an overhead strike pose, because again, the lateral movement in the torso is basically non-existent, and the legs really don't help that. While you can pose the Gustav Karl with the beam saber, and it can look okay depending on the circumstance, in general, if it's by itself and you're not posing it in like a mini diorama, I would not recommend posing it with the beam saber. So getting the Gustav Karl into the air, doing a kind of centered downward firing pose with the Jegan beam rifle, this shows off a couple of things. One, it shows off that the Gustav Karl does not look good in the air. Again, it looks kind of unwieldy and awkward. I have it in a kind of forward, either charging or leaping pose while it's shooting downward. The lack of articulation in the legs is really kind of disappointing, especially in the air. You can move the back skirt back to get a little bit more back motion in the legs, but the problem with doing that is that it pops the torso out, and that's kind of a common problem I had while I was posing this kit. The torso would just want it to pop off the ball joint in the waist, like at every single chance it got. And at that point, honestly, I might just recommend plastic cementing it down, because you're not getting any rotation out of it anyway. Like, you get very minimal before it pops out, so you might as well just secure it to the ball joint to save yourself some hassle. The Jegan beam rifle, again, it's way too small for the Gustav Karl to look any good, and combined with this aerial pose, it just looks extremely awkward. I would not recommend posing the Gustav Karl either in the air, or especially not like firing the Jegan beam rifle in the air. So I've made it clear that I don't really like the Jegan beam rifle on the Gustav Karl, so let's take a look at it with some alternative high-grade weapons. So starting with the Photon rifle from the Huckbein Mark II Trombe, here it is in my best kind of impression of the aggressive downward firing pose that I kind of do as a standard aerial pose in a lot of kits on this channel. And as you can see, the legs look a little better doing this than whatever the last pose was. But again, the lack of ability to articulate the shield kind of upwards with the arm makes it look a little awkward. And while the photon rifle, I think proportionally, like, while in overall size it matches the Gustav Karl in terms of proportions with the extremely long barrel, I don't think it really matches, because again, this photon rifle looks its best in the air with a kind of lighter mobile suit to act as like an extension of the arm and to complement like thinner proportions of it. With the Gustav Karl's like big heft, you really want a kind of bulkier, more powerful looking rifle. And while I really like how the photon rifle looks, it just isn't quite right for the Gustav Karl. So candidate number 2 for using with the Gustav Karl is the, I think it's called like the bladed assault rifle or something from the Command Quanta. Now, I really like how this rifle looks. Unfortunately, its compatibility with the Gustav Karl is a bit limited. I have it here in a grounded readying pose with the shield out in front of it, and it just has the rifle kind of by its side at the ready. Unfortunately, you'll notice as this spins around that it's not using the Gustav Karl's hand. That's because the handle is way too small to actually fit the Gustav Karl's trigger finger, and the handle is just the right awkward size that it won't fit into the standard holding hands. So I had to steal the hand off the Command Quanta to even get it to hold it, and even then, the arm is way too thick. So you can't really get it in a believable firing pose with the rifle, and it was like kind of on the verge of popping out of the hand at all times. So while I think this rifle is really good, and if the proportions were adjusted slightly, and if it were like maybe like 10% larger, it would look really good with the Gustav Karl. As it is now, it's definitely not something I would recommend using with it. So moving on to, I guess, era appropriate Xeon rifles. Here it is with the Gyrodoga Commander type beam rifle. Now this is a lot closer to the look that would kind of matches the Gustav Karl. This very large beam rifle, although I'm not the biggest fan of the top-loading magazine design, I don't think it looks super great with the Gustav Karl. It's definitely something I would consider. Again, the size and proportions are something that looks right with the Gustav Karl, and I think I'm on the right track here, but this rifle specifically doesn't look the greatest with it. I did have to modify it slightly, of course. There is a tab in the handle to help it clip into the Gyrodoga hand better. I just cut it off. It's not too big a loss because these are extra parts from the Psycho Doga kit, and I was never going to pose it with the standard Gyrodoga rifles. So yeah, this is definitely something I would consider posing with the Gustav Karl, but I think there's one better option. And that option is this, the standard Gyrodoga beam rifle. Or beam assault rifle, beam machine gun, I don't remember which it is. But yeah, this definitely looks the best with the Gustav Karl. The extra bulk provided by the, I think it's an underbarrel grenade launcher, the side, like, loaded magazine style of it, the secondary handle allowing the Gustav Karl to emphasize the weight and heft of the weapon, all of it looks right with the Gustav Karl. This is definitely the weapon I'm going to pose it with on the shelf. If you have this extra from building the Psycho Doga, if you have that kit, or if you can just buy, like, a Gyrodoga, use the Commander rifle with that kit, and then steal the standard beam machine gun to use with the Gustav Karl, that's definitely a great option. The Gustav Karl looks at its best when it's wielding this kind of very large gun, and this definitely demonstrates that the Gustav Karl looks at its best when you can steal a different weapon from another kit and replace the very dinky Jegan beam rifle that comes with it. This is an excellent weapon in general, and it looks even better on the Gustav Karl. So in conclusion, the high-grade Gustav Karl is an extremely impressive mobile suit, at least kind of by itself in terms of presence. The build is very kind of typical high-grade, there's not really much to talk about there, and this kit really kind of stands out in its sheer size. It is the same head height as the Nu Gundam while being leaps and bounds like kind of thicker than the Nu Gundam. It has it takes up way more volume on the shelf, it has way more presence, and unfortunately that does come at a bit of a cost to the articulation, particularly in the torso and the legs. The torso you are going to get next to no articulation out of, and the leg articulation is going to be exceptionally limited without moving the back skirt, which will pop the torso out. This contrasts heavily with the arm articulation, which is extremely good. This leads the Gustav Karl to be a kind of very specialized poser that looks extremely good on the ground in wide-legged poses, where it can do a variety of things with its arms, like normally like upward firing poses or defensive preparing poses. It does not look great in the air or in dynamic moving poses. This is definitely a kit that really shines when you have it on the ground doing those kind of very, I guess, imposing poses that just demonstrates its sheer size and heft. In terms of color accuracy, this kit is almost completely color accurate out of the box. There's going to be some color inaccuracies on the thrusters in particular. Apart from that, a lot of the detail that needs to be painted in are covered by color correcting stickers that look fine on this kit, and even if you don't use the stickers, they're easy enough to paint in. For $29 to $30, this is definitely a high-grade kit that I will recommend if you like the design. I know the very extremely chunky design and proportions of this kit is off-putting to a lot of people, which is why this isn't a universal recommendation. This is definitely, like, if you like the design or aren't off-put by it in any way, it's definitely a recommendation because of its sheer presence on the shelf, making it a unique addition to any collection. So that was my review of the high-grade Gustav Karl. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like reviews like these, please consider subscribing to my channel. If you like this video, give it a like, and I will see you in a few days with my review of the Master Grade V2 Assault Buster Gundam. I'll see you then.